Wherever you are and however you're listening, thank you for being back with us on another episode of Winning the Moment. This is episode 40, almost at a year. We've got an incredible guest today. He is the CEO of the Larkin Group, Jeremy Larkin, a local St. George kid who stayed in this community and really built something amazing. That's not really what we talk about on this episode, though. We talk a lot about relationships and vulnerability and finding your home. So stay tuned, like and subscribe. You are absolutely going to love it. You are successful in your own right, and so you are still, it doesn't matter how much success you've had, you still need coaching.
Okay, beautiful. Is this recording?
Mal, are you recording?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yep.
Oh, okay. This is probably quality content right now because you do. And like, here's one of the things that I've learned, and then you can take this whatever direction you want at your podcast. But I literally had this conversation 2 nights ago with somebody where we want it to be linear, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, it's linear, it's age-based, so by 30, I'll learn this, by 40, I'll learn this, by 50, I'll learn this. But one of the things that I've learned, especially being a single man and having gone through divorce and having kids and the complexity of that emotional upheaval, is that, you can't grieve anything in theory. So you can only grieve, like people will get divorced, and in the middle of the divorce, they'll pop back into the dating scene right after. They're like, I'm good to go. I had all my grief for the last 6 months while we were negotiating a divorce. I'm like, oh, no. See, you were having the grief of that time. Now you get to have the grief of the dust settled. Like you can't grieve in advance. Yeah. Does this make sense? Yeah, because
it's different. And for the audience listening, so they can understand your perspective, how far removed from your divorce are you?
6 years.
6 years. Okay, yeah, because there's obviously that immediate grief. But then there's the grief of like a Christmas, like maybe you don't have your kids and you're by yourself. And that's a different grief that you can't understand until you've experienced it.
Right. Like it has to happen in real time. And then part 2 to this. So number 1 is you can't grieve in theory. You know, you have to grieve in real time. But number 2 is that what happens is often as we're learning and growing and grieving, but grief is such a beautiful teacher. We have to clear the one grief. Yeah. And then when it's all done, it's like, okay, cool, we're done. Thank you. We've had our time. The next one's in line. Yeah. Or the next growth is in line. Yeah. So I'm 48, man. Like I feel like you said something in your book, by the way, that I haven't read the whole thing, but I freaking loved it. You shared, who did you quote at the beginning of one of the chapters that says that I know nothing? Oh, yeah. That's Socrates. Socrates. So there's a book, Letting Go of the Power of Surrender, David Hawkins. Yeah. You should get it. It's beautiful. What was it called? Letting Go of the Power of Surrender. So David Hawkins is one of the guys that PhDs passed on now. He's one of the guys that talked a lot about this, these themes of consciousness, or the vibrational energy chart, that the lowest level of vibrational energy is shame and the highest is enlightenment, like Christ or whatever you believe, whoever, like an enlightened teacher, the Buddha, somebody. And he actually talks about in the early chapters of the book, he says that they want us to know, organizations. And from simple terms, churches and governments and schools, they want us to know. But he says that the greatest strength that you'll ever have is not knowing. And he said that the most powerful position you can assume is not knowing. Yeah. Of uncertainty. And so when I saw that in your book, I was like, oh, this guy is great. What's funny too is I can remember actually when I had the epiphany, I was in my office and I was talking to Brack, my business partner, and I said, you know what, dude? Like the more that I learn, the more that I realize that I know nothing. I don't know anything. Because every time I learn something new, I realize that I don't actually know anything. As you get new information, it's like one belief you thought was true, new information, now it's not true. So it's like, well, what do I know? Really nothing. And I thought it was so brilliant, so I kind of thought I was brilliant. And then I looked it up and it's like Socrates said it literally thousands of years ago, you know? Yeah. And that's when I realized like, man, there aren't a ton of opportunities for new thought because so many things have already been done. It's just repurposing that thought in a way that makes sense to you. And that's really what I said in my book is like, truthfully, my book or anyone's book is just a collection of thoughts and experiences that I've had
that I'm molding to how I perceive it, right? And so
Absolutely.
don't take anything I say for granted, because if it doesn't fit you, then that's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of like the 12-step. A lot of people do 12-step work. They always say, keep what you like, keep what works, and ignore the rest.
Yeah, right.
Like try it on. Anyway, very cool. Very cool.
So have you done Brad Harker's breath work?
A bunch.
You have? I haven't done it only because it was on Thursdays and I love football. And so I was like, oh, football's over. I'm going to do it now. I got to do it. I think breath work is really incredible.
It's really just like my experience. Okay. Because I've taken people there who did not have a great experience. So breath work is a pure surrender process.
Yeah.
And so I have wept. I've screamed.
Yeah, I've heard some crazy things in the breath work.
And the way they set it up is the music's so loud, it's like you might as well be at a live concert. It's so loud. And that's my intention. Some people do breath work. I have a friend that facilitates in Salt Lake, and she does it with headphones. So you don't hear anybody.
Oh, interesting.
All the music's here.
Yeah.
But he has, some beautiful playlists, and if you can surrender into it, you're going to have this beautiful kind of spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And you might laugh uncontrollably. You might sob uncontrollably. You might do both in the same time period. But the people that I took a couple times that went, and these are good friends of mine that I care for, but I know their story.
Yeah.
And they were not going to allow that. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh. Well,
they were not going to surrender into this.
I wrote down not good experience because I wanted to ask why you believe they didn't have it, but you're getting there.
1,000%. If you don't, I did one, there's a beautiful guy, Hugh Vale. I don't know if you know who Hugh is.
No,
oh my gosh, he'd be beautiful to have on your podcast. Okay. So he does a lot of they call it horse medicine. He does a lot of equine therapy. He does it at Homestead Ranch. Hugh Vale, I think it's Vale. He put some on at Homestead, and I had the same experience there where there was a woman just screaming uncontrollably, almost to where I was like, ooh, this sounds, it's like, wait a minute, is she having a different experience than I thought? Yeah, I think you get what I'm saying. I'm like, I didn't anticipate that, but that's fully surrendered. Yeah. I don't know what experience, maybe she was.
Yeah.
But it's really, there's so many walls we have up.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've realized is we stay really busy, right? So
you mean as humans?
Yeah. So I'm just going to throw everybody into it. We stay really busy. And so we might do something like this. Hey, I'm going to take an evening for myself, especially, again, a lot of my lens, I was married for 19 years.
Okay.
4 kids, 17 to 24. Funny story. I drove here this morning and my 17-year-old son's 2007 Nissan Sentra that goes like 60. Like it literally is worth $2,000.
That's what you drove?
It's because he took my truck to Brian had today.
Okay.
So I give you this context if I'm in that phase where I don't have little kids.
Yeah.
17, 24, our world now is more like, his name's Matt, but many of my kids, I'd be like, hey dude, you want to go to Moab tomorrow and ride all weekend?
Right.
We mountain bike.
I just saw, and you guys just did like a whole snowboarding trip, right?
I was in Colorado for days.
That's why I actually asked you if you were still good, because I was like, I know you were on some big trip, and I was like, shit, I hope he's going to be back in time.
No, dude, I'm feeling good. I'm tired. I skied 7 days in a row and 8 of 9. It's the first time I've ever gone that.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Ooh. But what's funny is I'm in that mode with kids, right? And so my lens is a guy that was married for 2 decades and then divorced, and then I've been through some tough, very teaching relationships since that didn't make it to marriage. So now I'm this dad who's like, oh, you're going to Brian Head today. Well, I'm not sending him in the Sentra. You know?
Right.
It's the 3rd kid who's driven that crappy car.
Yeah.
So I'm cruising out here. And I'm like, I'm Jeremy Larkin. The guy.
Right.
Dude, you got to see it when we leave.
I love that.
But one of the things what happens is I have a lot of alone time. And because I have a lot of alone time, I can pull this fast one on myself. Hey, I'm going to just spend some time alone this evening. What do? I surf Instagram for 2 hours. See, I wasn't alone.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't hear myself, because how could I freaking hear myself?
Yeah, and you probably had the TV on as background noise.
Yeah, I'm like, Instagram's here. Lord of the Rings is playing in the background. I've actually done this one. I love that whole trilogy and beyond. And let's see. Oh, and I'm texting 7 different people for 10 different reasons.
Yeah.
So when you ask about breath work, and this is what I like about what you're doing with your podcast, is you're getting everyone's story.
Yeah.
Right. My world right now, and this didn't look this way 2 years ago, and in 2 years it might look different, is a lot of understanding. What can I hear in me? What do I have to say to myself?
Yeah.
Right. Like, what's going on inside of me? And it's really easy to kind of bypass with just stuff.
Oh, yeah. I always tell people when they're going through struggles with a partner or at work or whatever it is, I always say, well, have you taken a chance to figure out what you want first? Because if you're in a relationship with someone else, trying to figure out what they want, trying to navigate all of the difficulties of human interaction, if you don't know what you want, then how are you ever going to succeed at that anyways?
You nailed it.
Right? And no one really ever takes time to decide what they want or to have a relationship with themselves first.
Well, were you married young?
Well, I started dating my wife when she was 17 and I was 19.
Yeah.
But we took a while to get married. We didn't rush into it or anything, live together first and all that. But we've been together for 17 years.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah.
A long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was married young. And I was like weeks from turning 22. But more than weeks from 22, I grew up in St. George in the LDS faith.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask.
Yeah. So I grew up that way. And I'm really open about it. I'm not involved now, which is kind of an interesting familial dynamic because my parents are super stalwart and just amazing. And we can just go wherever we want on this podcast, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. There's no limits. And it's funny you say that because I've got this incredible group of friends that we've stayed close, for 20 years.
Right.
And there is this faith crisis, right, happening.
You bet there is.
Not just specifically for LDS, but just faith as in general, but specifically here in Southern Utah, LDS.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, and I've never been a part of it, and I've never been religious either, but it's always fascinating to me. So we're having this conversation driving up to this weekend together, and a friend finally comes out and says, yeah, well, it turns out I don't believe in it at all. Mm. And he's like, and I spent 2 years researching it and definitively, yeah, not true. However, it's too important to my parents and my wife's parents that I'm just going to play along for them.
Yeah.
And so we had this big open discussion with 18 different guys about this. And some of them were like, nope, I still totally believe. The other one's like, well, it's not true. And even the ones who were like, well, I don't actually believe it either, but I'm also staying in it for my parents because they couldn't handle seeing me not be a part of it. And so this very interesting dynamic within this religion where people are doing it for other people. And also for the society, because depending on your business and your relationship in the community, and if you started that, who you were in the community as this LDS faith-based individual, it can be sometimes challenging for your business to leave that faith.
Well, and here's kind of why I'm even going to go here on this show, is to really live into being fully me.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I love that share. And I actually have I don't know if it's interesting, but I think it's interesting. I have a philosophy about that discussion you had with all of your buddies, and that we'll get to. I didn't plan to get out of the church. And so my story is not like a lot of people who they researched it, they got angry, they're incensed, they have an axe to grind. And that's okay. It's been interesting for me is I don't have an axe to grind. I actually really love the LDS church for so many reasons. But I ended up out kind of unexpectedly. And
was this after the marriage?
This is after my marriage was over. Yeah. And so this was startling. And suddenly it was so for my story, I grew up in St. George. I get married at 22 years old.
In the temple?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really young.
Did you do a mission?
I did.
Okay.
Dominican Republic.
Okay.
Loved it. I actually have a degree in Spanish translation interpretation of all things. Like real Spanish. It's interesting. It's funny. My Hispanic friends, my cleaning crew at my house, they're like, you speak better Spanish than we do, at least more grammatically accurate. So, and I loved all that. So my story is, it's different in that it's not a typical story I came to discover.
Yeah.
Because, and there's a point I want to make. I think that we are all given tools to get where we need to go from a growth perspective. And some of us are going to do so as Protestants, and some of us are going to do so as Buddhists, and some of us can do so completely non-religiously, and some will do so in the LDS church, and some will do so in the LDS church and then they'll leave, and some will not be a part of the LDS church, and at 65 years old, some young missionaries will knock on the door and they'll join the church.
Right.
And I think what we get caught up in, and I've observed this, I feel like I call my position option C. Option A is people stay in the church. Option B is they get out and they're angry and they go, it's not true.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of energy around it's true or not. I call my position option C, which is I'm not interested per se in either of those positions.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in the spiritual path I'm on and what the church did for me. And 2 of my kids are involved.
I was going to ask.
2 of my kids are involved. 2 of my kids are not. Like fully in.
What about
fully
your
out.
ex-wife? Is she still part of it?
Kind of. Yeah.
I
mean, that I know of.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we communicate, but yeah. And she's here locally. Amazing woman. And how fortunate, right, that I have that story.
Yeah.
So my option C, position C, is, you know, we're given these tools, and the tools are relationships and church and school and stuff. And we're going somewhere. And at the end of this life, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either everybody who is a super religious zealot is going to be right, and that's all going to be true, or none of it's going to be true. But at some point, we're going to die.
Yeah.
And dude, I'm driving that Nissan Sentra crap. I could have been hit by anybody in my kid's the crappy car. I could have not made it through an intersection. But you know, we don't know our ticket's getting punched.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, you know, I grow up in that faith, and then I'm married for 19 years. I got married really young. And when you get married really young, we were talking to a therapist we were in Aspen, Colorado. Okay. A little place called Aspen. That's a direct quote from Dumb and Dumber.
I got a good Aspen story for you. When
dude, I want to know.
I remember, so I grew up in Wyoming, and so we were in Aspen one weekend. And when I was like younger, like 15 or whatever, and we went to Wendy's, and I was like, can I get a 99-cent McNugget? And they were like, no. So what do you mean? Like, it's $5. And I was like, what?
Aspen prices.
Yeah, exactly. Aspenflation.
Side note, and I'm not going to lose my train of thought. You know, I run a real estate company 19 years. Median sales price in Washington County right now is $500,000-ish.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Average is probably 6. Median sales price in Park City is about $2.2 million. Median sales price in Aspen is about $3.2 million, but that's not the exciting part. Average sales price of a single family dwelling in Aspen, because see, the median is made up of, it's the middle of the low to high, right? You know, you've been around real estate. The average of single family dwellings is $14 million.
Oh my God. That's
true,
insane.
True story. And while we were there, and then we'll come back to this segue on spiritual growth. While we were there, we were hanging out with ski instructor Kimberly. She's a friend of my buddy. And we went out and had just a ripping powder day one day with her. And she took us everywhere we wouldn't have known in Snowmass. And she was telling us, hanging out around the house that night, that she used to work in this high-end retail shop in downtown Aspen. We went in the shop. And she said that in the late 90s, dude, not now, 25 years ago, Russians would come in mainly, right? Like these kind of oligarchs.
Yeah, right, oligarchs.
But she said a lot of them were Eastern European, but a lot of Russians. And they'd come in, and the store would close at 6, but they would have wine and they'd hang out.
Sure.
They'd spend $100,000 in a retail store.
That's insane.
Like, so that's Aspen.
Aspen's a wild place.
There's nothing like it.
Yeah, it's
and
wild.
we had a very average, we were staying in a $15 million home because it's on the market.
Yeah, it's average actually.
Yeah, I know. But it was literally average. And you know what it felt like?
That's funny.
Go to East Zion or Bryan Head and go in like a 5,000 square foot nice cabin. That's what it was.
Yeah.
15 million.
That's
it was
crazy.
The house itself, it was fine.
It's not like it's the coolest house you've ever been.
Dude, I think in St. George, if you planted the same home in St. George, it'd be 2.
Wow.
And it was 15.6 on Zillow.
Wow.
So anyway.
So you were the therapist in Aspen.
Yeah. Well, so we're chatting with this therapist. She's a snowboarder from Denver. We had this whole group that gathered up. And we said, when is the frontal lobe really fully developed? We're like around the fire.
Yeah,
it was so cool. And I thought it was 26. Someone thought it was 28. She said it's 29.
Wow.
So you and I are barely adults at this point. So 29 years old, and she said that's male and female. The prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. So if you get married really young, which this is not an advertisement to not do that, but philosophically, one of the things I've learned is you don't have your identity fully intact.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And so what happens is, let's pretend you and your spouse are both young. The reason I think it even works at all. Because really, people getting married that young, it should all end in divorce theoretically.
Right.
But I think it works because you raise each other.
Yeah, no,
Does that resonate?
No, 100%. I talked about it on this podcast before with my wife. So being that she was so young, and I always had like an aspiration to be an adult for some reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know what I was after, but like when I was 18, like I had the condo with like furniture decorated, not like stuff from DI. You know what I mean? Like I always just wanted to be an adult.
Where was this at?
This was in St. George.
Okay.
And like my friends would make fun of me because like I would stay in and read, and they'd be like, "Dude, we're going out," you know?
You're like, Wall Street Journal has a new piece on the economy. I got stuff to do.
And I would do dumb shit like get the Wall Street Journal but not read it, or
awesome.
You know, like I had my office in my house, like all of these things. And so I was in pursuit of information at a very young age.
Uh-huh.
And so then I had that information to give to my wife, who was not in pursuit of information. So it was kind of just like whatever I said. She was like, okay, you know? And
sounds good.
And so I was really guiding her through life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even like when we moved to Arizona when I got promoted to this position. And so she moved there with me, which was great because it was Phoenix, not that different from St. George, just bigger. So we moved in there, and then I bought a house. And we lived together in that house. Like I charged her rent, even though we were dating. And, and I didn't need her money, but I just needed her to understand how to manage her own money.
Yeah.
Right. I needed her to have that expense because otherwise she wouldn't have had to learn that responsibility.
What's your wife's name?
Megan.
Does Megan know? Did she know she was paying you rent? Okay.
Yeah. And and this is like before Venmo, so she paid me in cash, right? I didn't need the money, so I like put it in a watch box in my office. And the best part is when I bought her wedding ring, I was like, oh, I have all this cash. And so I used her rent money to buy her wedding ring, like directly.
Honey, I have great news.
But anyway, so as she got older, you know, probably really close to that age, she started to develop a sense of her own identity and her own purpose and her own direction. And that caused a lot of friction in our marriage. Because she would be coming home and she'd be like, oh my God, these people just shared this book with me. You're never going to believe it. Let's say it's the 4 Agreements. Like it's transcendent. It's amazing. I was like, yeah, I know.
You're like Miguel Ruiz, dude. It's been around.
I told you to read that book 5 years ago, you know? And so it's like, why is the stranger telling you the same thing I told you? And now it has all this value. But like I'm your life partner and I told you and you couldn't have cared less, you know?
No one's a prophet in their own land.
Well, and what it was is she wasn't ready for the message.
Yeah.
It wasn't about who was delivering the message. It was about the time she received the message. And so it was this really hard shift of like her walking besides me versus behind me, right? And of course, consciously, it's not like I want my wife to follow me. Of course, it's better to lead together from the front. But it was this relationship dynamic and the shift. And so for me, it was really challenging until I was able to see that bigger picture. But so totally, I mean, as she got to that age and found herself, we had to rediscover our relationship dynamic with this different
balance. Are you 36? Did I do the math?
Yeah, I'm 36.
Okay,
correct.
just because you said 17 years, 19. I'll add something to this. That is an amazing share because this is why I said early, or however this gets cut together, maybe it wasn't early in the show, that we go through waves and like we'll kind of go through a theme of consciousness. Like mine's a lot around relationship and development, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because it's just where I'm at right now. And what's funny is I have a business I've run for 19 years. I'm really not unmotivated, but there are periods when I was obsessed with growing my company.
Right now, you don't build what you did if you weren't.
Yeah, right. Thank you. But right now, I like running my company. I'm not obsessed with it.
Yeah.
I'm somewhere else. Well, some of the research I've done is between 38 and 42, 43. It's interesting. If you look at divorce rates, they're skyrocketing around 40. And it's funny, I follow a couple of, they're supposedly relational Instagram channels, but they're really for women. But I'm like, I just invert the message.
Sure.
And there have been several of these like PhD authors, not just like talking heads on Instagram that are like, there's something that shifts, and they're talking to women in like 38 to 40, 40, 42, 44. And so first you have that prefrontal cortex decides to actually be mature at 29.
Yeah.
And then I think what happens for a lot of us and a lot of people is, and especially a lot of, women, I don't mean to speak for you, it's an observation because some of the incredible gals I've dated, it's like, here's the weird part. People are like, isn't dating terrible? I'm like, it's hard, and I call the mini heartbreaks along the way suck.
Yeah.
Which means, because look, there's only one of two outcomes when you start dating someone. You're either going to end up with them forever or it's going to end. So there's like a high likelihood of heartbreak at my age.
Of course.
But my experience is like, I just keep meeting incredible woman after incredible woman, like amazing women.
Yeah.
I'm like, good grief. Well, here's something consistent that they tell me, right? Lots of them are early to mid 40s.
I was going to ask, are they mostly all divorced?
All divorced. Yeah, all divorced. Yeah. I've met one widow in this whole thing.
Okay.
There's a consistent theme as we set this we're following the water down the slope, right? Is they said, my kids got pretty grown up, and many of them were at home mainly being moms.
Yeah, nurturers.
Can you see where this goes?
Yeah.
And they're like, wait a minute, 40, 42, 45. Who in the bleep am I?
Yeah.
Well, I had the same experience developmentally as I get married at almost 22. We raise each other. My ex-wife name is Megan, by the way.
Oh, how
she
funny.
may never see this.
How's she spell it?
Megan.
Okay, mine's Meagan.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Great lady. Therapist in town now.
Okay.
I'm like, man, you should have done that earlier. You could have texted us. But it's interesting to talk about those things where you realize she or someone could hear this, but only positive. I have zero negative. So, you kind of raise each other, and then we had many issues. Everyone has issues. Sometimes I love hate, as in I hate the question, hey, so why'd you get divorced? I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, well, first of all, you didn't earn the right to the story.
Sure.
But we got divorced, okay? And we divorced when I was 42. Well, suddenly I'm born and raised LDS, and then I'm suddenly not really connected to the church, and I'm not married, and I don't live in we raised our kids in a place called Countryside. It's off of down by Cox Landing, 900 South Gate.
I know that.
Yeah.
Quick question. Who led the decision to be divorced, you or your wife?
She was more of the leader, but it was mutual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And that was hard. And that's actually an interesting part of my story is there's been this theme in my life of feeling like I get left.
Oh.
Isn't this funny? And remember, I'm Jeremy Larkin, the business guy.
Yeah.
Here's the wild thing that I'll insert here. The reason I think it's so important to be this vulnerable on this type of a platform, people don't connect with our greatness. They connect with our humanity.
Yeah, I just
This is so true.
I just gave that a similar line when I was talking to the Utah Alliance at their quarterly meeting last week, and I said, when I giving the talk, because it's talking about winning the moment, right? And I was like, don't get lost. This isn't all about winning and success, because no one really gives a shit. When people connect, or when you're vulnerable with your failures, because that's what they can relate to, right? And sometimes success can motivate someone, but sometimes it turns people off.
Yeah.
But when you can be vulnerable and talk about your obstacles and your trials and tribulations, everyone can connect with that.
Yeah,
right?
like how relatable is someone who appears to always be winning, right?
Yeah.
It's inspiring. It's not relatable. Two different things.
Right.
So suddenly we've kind of raised 4 kids. At the time they were 11 to 17, so they were not raised. I'm no longer connected to the church. I'm no longer in my home. I'm no longer in my neighborhood where I built 2 homes. I built a spec home. I built my home, and I built a spec home 5 doors away. And then 9 years later, we sold the home and moved to the spec home and bought it back. The lady had put this rad pool and all this stuff in the backyard, and we were like, sweet. Kathy. I think her name was Kathy. So I'm out. And I've been a full-time dad of 4. Super engaged, dude. Like, so engaged, it was really normal for me to take all 4 of my kids somewhere alone all the time.
Did you become more engaged after divorce?
Well, it was hard. It's kind of difficult. So to answer that, no, I tried. But what happens is I have a 15 and 17-year-old. They're living at home with mom because they're like, Dad, it's just a pain in the butt to go to your house. So I moved downtown St. George. And probably kind of something cool to talk about is a theme of restoration. Maybe we'll get to that. So, because there's a theme.
Yeah.
All the homes I own, all the properties I own are old. My dog is 3-legged. There's a whole theme here.
Well, you kind of started that downtown revival.
Like I'm pushing that.
Yeah.
Dude,
you started that probably 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah. I'm one of the people. I don't know if you know Danielle and Darren Larkin.
I do. Yeah.
So Darren's my cousin. Danielle and Darren are like siblings to me.
Yeah. And they built that awesome house downtown.
Yeah. They are part of that movement.
And then Jocelyn and Ryan built their awesome
Ryan
house
across the street.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I was just around the corner. So before I moved to the one I'm in now. And so I suddenly was like, who am I? I'm not the church guy. I'm not a full-time dad of 4. I'm a part-time dad of 2. I'm still a dad.
Yeah.
Because I think there'd be people who would be like, oh, excuse me, sir, you were still a dad. No shit. You get my point.
Yeah, if you're listening, we know what you mean.
Yeah. I have 2 kids coming to my house, and they're coming part-time. So when you start doing the math, I'm like, well, now I'm 25% of the time I spent with my children. And this was such an uprooting. It took me 3 years, and I finally had a therapist 3 years into this go, you went through a full identity crisis. I knew it, but I didn't know how to say it.
Well, I think it's important for the listeners too, because here's a person who had achieved a lot and yet...
Oh, by the way, and the business was still going and it looked fine.
Of course. And yet at, what are you, like 42, 43 at this time?
Yeah, 42, and I was divorced.
And you don't know who you are. So think about like the young listeners who are like 19 and in college, like, I don't know who I am. It's like, yeah, that's just part of life. Like you will evolve and change, and who you are today is not who you're going to be 5 years from now.
Listen, to that point, one of my kids, I won't even say which because I will protect him, but he called me while I was in Aspen on this trip, and he was having a crisis. He was having a work crisis, like in his job, and he was really emotional. And what happened is the floodgates opened, and it wasn't just that problem, but he just listed, Dad, nothing in my life works.
Right.
Well, he's in that young age range, our young listeners. And first of all, I was heartbroken for him because I know he was hurting, right? And it's really easy to feel like, dude, I didn't even know what I was doing in college. The reason I even got the degree in Spanish interpretation translation, I was good at it. I had no other clue what to do, so I followed it. It was the first time in school I got straight A's because I was really gifted linguistically. So yeah, for our young listeners, and you don't want to hear from older folks, oh, you just don't have it figured out yet. We do. We don't.
No.
We don't. But time and hindsight is incredible, right?
Yeah.
Because we're like, oh, now I see. So now in my story, the Larkin Group, our company, it's got this big old brand. It looks cool. It sounds cool. The people who knew there was a mess were my team of people.
Right.
And I had a couple of guys who like kept the business running. You know one of them. You know Robert McFarland?
Yeah. I love
Okay, so
I love
I trained Robbie. Like he'll tell you that I was his mentor. Robert, Michelle Evans, and Jesse Paul. Jesse's my business partner today. Robert and I are close still. Those 3 kept the company going. I was like a lunatic. Like legitimately, I was not okay. But it looked like I was okay.
Yeah.
Right? And so we kept it going. We sold real estate. I mean, good grief. We helped 200 families. And I think we helped like close to 200 families 2 of those years. 3 years ago, it was 236. 2 years ago, it was 203. This year, it was 162 with the down market. And in real estate, we track those things. We have to. It's a lot of business.
Yeah.
Guys, that's like millions of dollars of gross commission income, not profit. And we're talking 100 million in real estate year after year. Meanwhile, I'm over here going, I'm a shell. I'm a shell of who I thought I was. But here's the greatest thing that happened. I really wasn't any of the things I thought I was. And mainly for the first 42 years of my life, I think I was pretending.
Yeah. Well, I think that I kind of even noticed that for myself doing the book and then doing the podcast. Like, no, and then I never had social media. So it's like now I'm on Instagram. And then you're like, well, am I supposed to just emulate the people who are successful? Mm-hmm. Like, am I just supposed to try and do what Joe Rogan does? Or on Instagram, am I just trying to be like Alex Hormozy? Like, that's successful, so do I follow that? And so it was like also for me kind of like a crisis of like, well, how am I going to portray myself? When the easy answer is just who I am.
So,
but it felt so challenging to do that.
Dude, that is so good. So I'm going to give you, what I love is Cody's taking notes here and getting ideas. We both get ideas. I'm going to give you a couple of people that you're just going to love. Okay. So there's a guy named Matt Gottesman, okay, Gottesman. I actually hung out with Matt a month ago in Scottsdale. So Matt has a beautiful blowing up podcast now. I mean, it's probably at 50,000 followers maybe.
Wow.
You know,
okay. Yeah, that's great.
Matt has his brand, his trademarked thing is the niche is you.
Okay.
Okay. The niche is you. So basically the thing that Matt talks, he is such a beautiful man. and he's very godly. He grew up Jewish, very godly dude, right? Like he and Jesse and I met in the lobby of the Fairmont Princess Conference Center when we were at a mastermind event.
Okay.
He came over, hung out with us for 2 hours. And the thing that he talks about is no one's better at being you than you.
Right.
You're the best in the world.
Yeah, 100%.
So as I referenced some resources, the niche is you, right? And so what he coaches on is stop trying to copy people, right? Because we all want to copy people. Now we can model people.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to grow this podcast, you can be like, well, how did Rogan do it? Well, first of all, you'd have to be Rogan.
Yeah.
See, Rogan's podcast grew.
I kind of get on Fear Factor and UFC and have all this exposure.
Do you see? Right.
You know?
Yeah. His
Name
podcast
equity.
grew because he's Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
You're not.
Be
And
a
that's-
famous comedian.
Think about that, right?
Yeah.
So the thing you could model is like, okay, well, what systems and tools and did he use? But like, you're going to come in here and like smoke weed on your show or whatever. That's probably not what you're going to do on your show.
Right.
So Matt talks about, and gosh, he's just such a great man, but he's really helped me realize this copycatting that we do, it keeps us in this perpetual state of comparison all the time.
Yeah.
So we're always benchmarking like, oh, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I've only got, I don't know what I saw on your Instagram, but you're getting up there, probably 12, 15,000, something like that.
Yeah,
Is
like
that good?
11, I think.
Yeah, some good numbers. I don't even know why I remembered that. Mainly because we have a real estate training page called The Complete Realtor that I'm just starting. But that benchmarking, for me, my experience leaves me feeling yucky.
Yeah, feels empty.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, because then I don't like myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm not hitting the thing.
Right.
I'm like, oh, I'm not keeping up with Cody. I'm not keeping up with whoever. And I think so as I look at my story, all the while all this nonsense is happening called life, I built this business and we built this brand. And I was kind of, they say finding yourself. I think it's uncovering yourself.
Sure.
I know this kind of theory and philosophy that like when we were born and we were tiny, we didn't have all these shackles.
That's why kids are always happy.
Especially 2 and 3.
Yeah, right. Like that's what I mean. When they're at that age and there's
How old, you have kids, right?
Yeah, my son is 7 and my daughter's 10.
Oh, I like those ages a lot.
Yeah, it's fun.
They're really sweet.
Because like on this last vacation we went to on Thanksgiving in Mexico, I became my son's friend on vacation because we could interact in a real way.
Is he the 7 or 10?
He's 7, right? Well, because my daughter had a friend there, so she was like running around with her, like feeling like grown-ups, being able to walk around the resort by themselves, And so my son was left with me, and it was so fun because like we were playing catch and we'd go to the beach, and it was like the first time ever on a vacation where I was his friend.
What's his name?
His name's Cash.
Cash. Sweet. Dude, I love that, right? Right? That time with you.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. He will remember this.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. We just went to a Utah Tech basketball game last Thursday, and the mascot like got super involved with him because like there wasn't a lot of people there, and we're close to the front, and so like he silly stringed him and was like, and like they like chased each other around, and he took his hat and he just like had this experience that was just amazing. And in Cash's mind, he doesn't realize that it's a small school and there's not very many people there, and no one even knows who that mascot is.
Yeah, he might as well have been in the NCAA championship
exactly,
game.
Right? And then also one of his friends came who I coach in his sports and just happened to be sitting next to him. So he got to experience it with like one of his friends. And after the game, he was like, Dad, that was the best night ever. And it was like,
forget it.
Never.
When I was, speaking of Utah Tech, so I'm a Dixie State grad.
Yeah.
I graduated from Dixie State in Southern Utah University. So when I was 10, and this is a funny memory. So your other one, your girl's 10. What's her name?
Yeah, Olivia.
Olivia. So she's 10, right? So in 85, I was 10. And Dixie College is who it was at the time.
Yeah.
They played in the old gym with wooden bleachers, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that.
They went and they won the national championship, the NJC. NJCAA.
Yeah, because when they were a junior college, they were super competitive.
Correct. Avery and Parrish was the star. I still remember that guy. Let me tell you a funny story that I remember from those ages. I remember being in Wichita, Kansas at the game when they won. I remember what I was wearing. I was wearing gray jeans and a red Dixie College sweatshirt. I remember.
That's amazing.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
And I remember being at the Holiday Inn Holidome. And it was like a Holiday Inn that had a mini golf course and an indoor pool. And I thought,
coolest thing in the world.
oh, bro, I might as well have been at Disney World for like a year there. That's what you remember this stuff, right?
100%. Well, then even just saying that. So this is my son after he got Silly String.
This is so good.
And he's got the Utah Tech sweater. He's got the Utah Tech hat.
Down.
Like he's in it, you know?
Yeah. I love, but that's the whole conversation is Utah Tech. I'm actually a huge supporter of what they've done. But,
me too.
So, you know,
finding yourself.
Yeah. Well,
uncovering yourself.
Yeah. And there's a term that I'll share. So I'm mentioning names, but I met a gal by the name of Jennifer Hurst who's been a coach of mine. She's here in town, Jen Hurst. And she's Everyday Enneagram on Instagram. And anyone listening should definitely check her out.
What was her Instagram?
Everyday Enneagram. So she's a trauma certified Enneagram coach. She uses the Enneagram as the basis of her work.
What is that?
Enneagram is it's a personality assessment. And it's wildly good. And there's 9 numbers. I'm an 8. I'm like pure 8. And the 8, by the way, is 2 things, which are paradoxical. They call it the challenger. The 8 is incredibly assertive and aggressive and super soft and loving. It's the weirdest combination. So I kind of am this weird thing, but I went through, there was a relationship that was several years after my divorce. And when it came to a halt, so here I've been divorced and I'm running the Larkin Group and I've been in this new relationship and I'm raising my kids and they were 11 to 17 and now they're like, by this time, they're like 16 to 23. And when it ended, it was like everything came rushing forward because I was doing a lot of good work during that time. But it was like now the divorce had rushed forward and now that relationship had rushed forward. This is 2022. And now it was like identity crisis number 2, right?
Yeah.
And I did some work with Jen and a fellow that a lot of people follow on Instagram named Mark Groves. And Mark's wild. He's got 1 million people, I think, following him.
Is he local or no?
No, he lives in Canada and he's pretty fun. And so Mark had been a friend of mine from 5 years prior before he was really famous in his space. And I worked with the 2 of them. And there are really 2 themes. And I talked to my team about this yesterday, not about me per se, but I talked to them about this idea of, I'd been to therapy this week. And I said, guys, remember what you said when we first started chatting? You never have it all figured out.
Yeah.
So I went and hired both of these people simultaneously. And I was like, look, I'm 47 years old at that time. Life is not getting any shorter. I'm not getting any younger. Life's not getting any longer. I'm not getting any younger. And there were 2 themes. And one was to come out of self-abandonment, which is kind of Mark's policy. And I saw all the ways that I had self-abandoned through my life.
Give an example of that, self-abandonment.
Okay. This is really good. In 2000, I'm going to get granular. In 2018, I was divorced. I was in this new relationship. My kids, my 2 boys were going to go to scout camp at Catalina Island. When I was 13, I went to Catalina Island with a lot of guys in town that are like well-known now, that are like, they've grown up and have great careers and people know them, but we all lived in the same neighborhood called Morningside Park.
Oh yeah, I know Morningside. Morningside's a great place.
7th,
I had a bunch of friends that lived there when I was in high school too.
Yeah, so the guys that were there, by the way, at that time, me, Kyle Wells, Shane Whitwer, Tyler Wilkinson, Shane Scott.
Yeah,
these
all the hitters.
Yeah, all these guys, right?
Yeah.
They're my friends from childhood.
Yeah.
And so not only were my boys going to go, they were 11 and 13. It was important because I went. And add an extra layer, some of those guys were in the LDS ward at the same time, or leaders that were going to go.
Wow.
Like a reunion trip.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And to go to Catalina Island for the Boy Scouts was a big deal. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? So I was in this relationship and I felt this pressure to not go. And the pressure to not go is that I'd spent a month with my kids straight of that summer. We had this weird arrangement the first summer where we did a month each.
Okay.
Which was kind of hard.
Yeah.
Because we were newly divorced and you're like, and I was an active dad. I was known for taking all 4 of my kids that Brian had alone when they were young.
Yeah.
Like I did it.
Yeah.
I spent this whole month and I felt this pressure to not go. Please stay home.
From your partner.
From this gal I was dating. And I stayed home. It was the first great resentment in that relationship. Massive resentment. But what is resentment? Resentment is, it's really against us, not the person that we're
because you decided.
Bingo.
You're in control of your decisions.
Bingo.
She may have influenced your decision, but at the end of the day, you chose. I always wondered that in relationship dynamics.
Bro, and this was a big deal to me.
Why people punish their partners, right? Like, why do they do that? Or try to influence them to do something that they know, like, oh, he probably should do that, but I just don't want him to, like selfishly for themselves. And it's like, that's never going to work.
No. And so this was a dynamic that existed for years after.
And I try and tell the young people that I work with when they're in relationship dynamics, like, you got to set the precedent right now. Because if you at your young age, if you want to go to this jazz game with us and your girlfriend's saying you can't because you got to do some other thing, well, you are setting the precedent for that for the rest of your life. Because once you get 5 years down the road and you've always done it, and then you say, like, you know what, I'm done, I'm not doing it anymore, well, that is going to cause
a massive friction.
That may be impossible to recover from.
The die is cast, as they say.
Yeah.
Right? Whew, you've thrown the dice on the table. That is so spot on. And so I didn't go. And it was the first great resentment. And the resentment really, at the end of the day, was at me. And it was a major self-betrayal because the only right answer in hindsight, now I've learned from this.
Yeah.
Because remember, we always get to learn if we want later.
Yeah, Nelson Mandela has a great quote that says, I never lose, I either win or I learn.
I've heard that. I forgot about that. But I didn't go. And they went. And they had a great time. And I heard all the stories. And I saw all the photos. And I wasn't involved. It was a huge self-betrayal. And the only right answer in hindsight to me that day would have been like, hey, I'm going whether you like it or not. It would have been delivered a little more lovingly.
Of course.
Okay, self-betrayal. And if I look back on my life, there were so many times when I self-betrayed, when I didn't, and then didn't choose me. So this is kind of a Mark Groves policy, like it's about policy, but a philosophy. And the other part was working with Jen. She said, I want to help you come home to yourself. And this is a phrase that I've taught so many men. I do. By the way, I brought you a gift today. It's one of my favorite books. We're going to talk about it.
I've been peeking trying to see the title. Is it?
It's for you, dude. Men's Work, Connor Beaton. That's for you.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Every man should have read that book. And I tell women, if you have a man in your life, force them to read it. But she said, I want to help you come home to yourself. And I was like, I'm 47. What do you mean?
I've been home.
But I wasn't, dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
yeah.
Right? Yeah, I wasn't. And so the last 18 months of my journey to the recording of this show in January of 2024 have been a coming home. And it will now, going back 30, 40 minutes, make complete sense why I talk about sitting and facing and being with me. That theme, you can see where that is. Coming home to me was saying, hey, who's there? Who am I? Who am I without a wife? Who am I without a girlfriend? Who am I outside of my business? Who am I outside of a church? By the way, you don't have to leave your wife, your church, or anything else to do that.
Yeah, you're just saying these were markers that made me who I was in a perception, right? Even the comment of Jeremy Larkin drove an old Nissan Sentra
it's
here.
Hilarious,
we do
right?
attach ourselves to things, right? Because the fact of the matter is, if I saw you driving in that car on the road, I would think to myself, what the hell is Jeremy doing in that?
Of course you would.
Right?
There was a story 2 years ago. Joe Wright is one of my buddies. He was an agent for me. He now runs DR Horton's projects. He would hang out with some of I call them the real estate bros in St. George. It's the mid-30s guys.
Yeah.
They're kind of like up and coming. And they're like, what's Larkin like? And Joe's like, super normal. And then they're like, well, where does he live? And he said he lives in this is no joke at the time, a 1,500 square foot all brick home built in 1966 downtown. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
Because there's a perception.
Yeah.
And now I live in a 4,000 square foot all brick built in 1960, right? So we do attach ourselves, and that's why I laugh. And that's why I say it. People would say the same thing. Like, what are you doing in this car? I don't know. My kid needed my truck and my Sorrento. My other vehicle is at Kia having a latch replaced. And I woke up and he's like, hey, Dad, I'm going to go to Brian Head every day. And I said, oh, yeah, shoot. So this coming home is a process that, man, I just pray everybody gets to somehow do it. And again, they don't have to quit their life to do it. That, please don't leave your spouse if you don't need to. Right? Please don't change your career at 47 or 8 if you don't have to. And I didn't. Please don't leave your faith if it works for you.
Yeah.
And this coming home, dude, has been, but here's what happened. It opened up doors, this book. I spent almost a week at Connor's home in upstate New York. Connor Beaton, guy, Man Talks is his Instagram. I spent time with Mark Groves and a group in Hawaii. That was a painful place to have to go, right? I went to retreats. I faced myself. Mark swore me. He said, I don't want you to date for 3 to 6 months, minimum 90. He said, you're not even allowed to text. And I did about 5 months of like hardcore celibacy. I don't mean sexual celibacy. I mean like celibacy, dude.
Yeah.
Like I did not. That was kind of hard.
Yeah.
Because
I've given some advice to my friends who've gone through hard relationships. It's like, you got to find yourself first, because if whatever happened in your other relationship was equal parts, it was your partner and it was you.
Dude, I was
right.
Player.
And you've got to figure out you before you can start another relationship. Because if you go from one to the other, then you're just kind of morphing into who do you need to be for this next person. You need to figure out who you are and then figure out how you can work together. But not just be like a chameleon that's like, oh, I'll adapt to the way that you are now. Because eventually, just like my friend who didn't to go to the Jazz game, eventually you're going to be like, I don't want to morph anymore. I just want to be me. And once you're too far down in a relationship, you can't do that and still continue because it's too much of a polar shift. So figure out who you are first. Be confident in that. Be happy with yourself, because you're not going to be happy with someone else if you're not happy with yourself first.
Not even a chance.
Not at all.
Right? And you talk about the Jazz game. What a great example. Or Boy Scout camp. The interesting thing is, had he said I'm going, it would have been a minor friction.
100%.
5 years later, it's a Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
It's like an earthquake opened the earth and everyone fell in and died, right?
Yep.
That's how big the fight's going to be. And so this has been a lot of my journey. And I think the hardest part about it is that because I was so into my business for so long, right? And at one point I was selling just giant amounts of real estate myself. I really started to figure out how to do it at scale and in our business, an agent selling 12 homes a year is being productive. An agent selling 24 homes a year is doing really well. An agent selling 30 or 40 plus is killing it. There was a period where I was selling 110, 120 with my staff. I had gone into that. And there's a reason I'm telling you this, because it ain't about how special I am. Who freaking cares, dude, right? But that was the mastery that I had gone to in that world. And it's not what I cared about, but that was a focus. And so the hardest thing about the last couple of years is I'll always be checking in like, oh, shouldn't I be more thinking about my business? Shouldn't I be more thinking about whatever I need to be thinking about? But I think that we have to trust the flow of where we are.
Well, and is it hard for you with your ego? Like, because now if you're not selling 110, 120, and weird. Some other real estate person is, then you're like, oh.
This is hilarious. You're going to love this. So we did our annual awards yesterday for our team. The culture is so incredible. And the reason the culture is incredible, yes, I started it, but I have surrounded myself with incredible people. And so we did annual awards for 23 for the team. And then Jan, my director of operations, and Taylor, who's my transaction coordinator, they call them Larkin LOLs. It's funny. My name is on the building and I don't even think about it. I don't even notice my name on the building.
Bill, you did a great job on the building too.
Great
you,
work. Man. Thank you. And we can talk about that, but they put together these hilarious prizes for everybody. I'm like, how could you possibly even have thought of that? It was so good. And all that culture's fun, but we started to talk about production. I sold 3 homes in 2020.
Oh, wow.
because I was coaching the team.
Yeah, right.
3. Technically, there were another 9 that we sell for a company called Sunwood Homes, but I sell them with Jessica, one of my agent partners, and I didn't really take credit for them, but 3, dude. 3. But here's what comes up when that happens. The ego is questioned, but also you wonder if you're being useful. Does that make sense? Like, dude, am I being useful right now? Because my role is not the same anymore in my
I can see how you would think that. I wouldn't think that way just because you are only one man. So if you're helping build and foster a team, it's infinitely more successful.
We have 17 people now.
The mind of 17 is more powerful than the mind of 1.
Yeah. So Three homes. And right now I think I'm putting 3 listings on the market for clients this month. But the impetus of what we're trying to do with the business is I've told, if you're in my world intimately, like the team is, they believe me. I'm like, guys, it's not about my name on the sign. If I could go back in time and not have it been the Larkin Group, had it been like, I don't know, the blank group, some generic word, I think it would have been better. But the problem is 19 years ago, we put Larkin Group on the signs, and 15 and 10 and 8, and now you can't reverse it.
Yeah.
But I really don't take satisfaction in a name on it. What I take satisfaction is us doing good things.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We followed a circuitous path in this conversation.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to share it, what was the catalyst of the divorce?
Mistakes are made, right? But I'm going to predate the mistakes that were made. The catalyst, honestly, in my estimation is, and someone may talk to my ex and say that's absolutely not true.
Sure.
But knowing what I know now, and this is such a conversation for every young couple.
Yeah.
Is you had 2 people with a lot of wounds who got married young, and we didn't know how to navigate those wounds.
Got it.
And so she came from her home with her wounds, and I came from my past with my wounds, right? Some things that I struggled with and damage, that I call it, right? As a young boy, like 8, 9 years old, dealt with some stuff that was challenging. And you get together, and I mentioned Mark Groves. Mark calls it wound mates.
Sure.
He's like, instead of soulmates, what you have is wound mates.
You were brought together by the trauma.
Absolutely, right? And did we love each other? Well, of course we did. Gosh, we raised a family.
Yeah. But
if you look at a lot of the bad outcomes in marriages, they are absolutely just symptoms. They're symptoms of all the things.
Sure.
I had a close friend in town whose partner had an affair. And for several years, it was like, well, they had an affair. But I'm like, look, do you realize, as the dust settles, you start to realize the affair in that marriage was a symptom.
Yeah, right. There's obviously, if everything was great, the affair wouldn't have happened. Obviously, something was missing.
And it never justifies it.
Yeah, not to say it's okay, but certainly if that did happen, there was something missing. To have someone do something that they know is going to be heartbreaking and challenging and scary and all those things.
Well, and I know this individual. I know both these individuals. The individual that's involved in that would have never chosen that. Had you said to this guy early on, hey, when you're like 30 or 40 or 50, you're going to have an affair, he would have been like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so I think when we did our annual awards, before we had fun, we had like this kind of serious conversation.
Yeah.
And I talked to my team about there's a difference between serious and somber. Sometimes when we have serious conversations, people who don't have an appetite for serious start feeling somber. And I have to remind them, hey guys, this isn't somber. This is just serious.
Yeah.
But we got into this conversation around your outer world is a reflection of your inner world.
Yeah.
And in our organization, we have quite a few people who are really new. So we have 5 or 6 of us that are really experienced. And then, so I have 4 staff. 4 staff, like they don't sell real estate. They're just operations. Throw them out. So we have 4 or 5 of us that are really experienced in real estate. You have 3 or 4 that are experienced in real estate, and you have another half dozen agents who are brand new as in 1 year or less.
Okay.
And I said, do you know, such an interesting conversation. It got a little somber when I said this. I said, do you know how I know that most of you in here have fouled up money beliefs? And it was real silent. Somebody's like, how? I said, because you're not making enough money.
Yeah. We had this really interesting conversation.
That's how I know.
With this guy. His name was Ryan, and growing up, his family hated wealthy people. And almost like he said that they were racist against wealth.
Sure.
Right? So like that kind of, and it wasn't until his dad passed that he finally found wealth for himself. And we realized it's because he had that trauma of thinking like his dad would actually be upset with him if he became wealthy.
Wild?
Right. And so he had all these blocks, and every time that something was going to be good, it'd be like a self-sabotage.
Or if he'd get the money, he'd squander it.
So he blew it. He blew everything he had until his dad passed, and then he finally accumulated wealth because the burden of the wealth was gone.
Isn't that interesting, dude? And so circling around, I said, and it was pretty serious in that moment in the room. And I said, see, if you didn't have fouled up money beliefs, you'd have money. Because one of the things about my organization is everybody shows up and works. And remember that realtors, or as lots of people like to say, realtors are independent contractors. So my operations people are salaried, bonused, all the things. Our sales team, they're independent contractors. So they don't sign, they're not in an employment agreement, they're an independent contractor agreement.
So they show up if they want to.
Yeah. But what we have is team standards. So we'll say, well, if you want the leads, you do X. If you want this, you do Y. And so we're actively involved. This isn't like a real estate brokerage. This is like 4 mornings a week we do sales training.
Yeah.
Monday morning we have our team huddle. Thursday lunch we have our team huddle. Like it's structured in a way, right? But for salespeople who are having a hard time, and you might have someone in our business, they're like, I made 300 dials this week and I got 50 people on the phone and I called through all the old leads. A lead in our world would be somebody who inquired about buying a sell at some point. No one wants to work with me. Open houses don't work. The leads are bad. They don't realize how much that's more of a reflection of their inner belief system.
Yeah.
Than reality.
Well, and also if they just told you the leads are bad, they're incentivized for them to be bad so they can be right. Because
Aren't we crazy?
Every human wants to be right. So they would rather next week make 300 phone calls and not have success. They can look at you and say your leads are bad.
Yeah.
So they could be right versus being successful.
Right. This is actually true. Yet if we asked ourselves,
of course you wouldn't do that consciously,
right?
But our conscious mind doesn't drive our actions.
Isn't that
the
wild?
subconscious does, right? So the subconscious drives 90% of our behaviors. And so we don't realize that we're doing it. But what our mind does know is we've said things and it wants to validate our beliefs. So if I said the leads are bad, then subconsciously every time it's bad, I'm going to remember that. So that way I can be like, yeah, they're bad. And we'll just forget the good ones because it doesn't serve our story.
Mm-hmm. Let me go back in time for a second. It's kind of interesting because we're jumping all over the place.
Yeah.
You asked me about my marriage. Here's another reason it struggled. I took on the belief that it was my job to fix it. My job exclusively. Literally, I took that belief on.
Interesting.
When it really started to fall apart, 2013, I literally, Cody, I believed it was my job. Like I was going to roll up my sleeves as I've done today, and I was going to like turn the other cheek and I was going to fix it. And a lot of my healing has been around realizing I can't fix everything. I can't, right?
Yeah.
I can't fix my kids. I can't fix a partner. I can't fix my team. Quite honestly, I can't even fix me,
That's one of the hardest parts about being a parent is you want to and fix is maybe the wrong word, but protect maybe, but you can't. You know what I mean? Like you don't want your son to have whatever obstacle he had, but you can't stop it from happening.
Yeah, dude. Should I share something from here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so I brought Cody a book.
Let me see it really quick.
That book, get that on camera. Beautiful. Okay. Every man on the planet should read this. If you're a woman and you know a man, they should read this. One of my favorite women in my life, one of my closest friends in the whole world. She's so amazing. She basically read the book. She just wanted to understand.
Yeah.
If you're a woman and you know a man and you have a male partner, you should read it with him. And so Connor's work, he's a big guy on Instagram, but his wife is Vienna Farron. She's a Mindful LFMT is her group. She has actually a sister book to this. And I don't know if it was intentional, called The Origins of You. It's for women.
Okay.
And it's about going back and understanding Connor's philosophy. And he's not here to speak for himself, but we can tag him or whatever. In my vision, his philosophy, he actually has recycled this post many times. It says one of the most important and valuable things I've ever done in my life is asking myself why I am the way I am.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
So this book, he walks through, this is incredible.
Hold on one second. That's so much better than What's Your Why?
Yes.
It's not that different. It's like just a little bit different.
Don't you think What's Your Why is just a buzz thing anyway?
Yeah, well, it's like, I mean, I believe in it, but it's harder because it's so much deeper than that. And like, it doesn't live on the surface, it lives inside. But why am I the way that I am basically is giving you the information to start the dialogue to finding your why.
Yeah. It's incredible. I sat in his home, November of 2022, myself and 21 other men, 4-day retreat. It was rough. It was like somatic work. This wasn't chitty chat. Like people were working through their stuff. Men yelled and screamed and cried and sobbed. And
do you know Eric Gubler?
I know of Eric.
Okay, so he does a thing called the program, which is like for men, similar. And he asked me to go to the one in December. And it was during the week, so it would have been hard anyways. But I really said no. I didn't tell Eric this, so hopefully Eric's not listening. Yeah. I really said no because I didn't want to do the work. Like I knew it was going to be challenging.
Listen, I need Blake or somebody recording this to block Eric on the feed. Block him on Instagram.
I didn't want to do the work.
Dude, it's painful.
Physically and mentally. Like, because I knew there's work to do. And I just didn't want to. Not that I didn't think it would be valuable. I knew if I did it, I would come out better than I went into it. But I was like, I am not mentally ready to go do this work.
Okay, I bet it's very similar. And, you said something like when you talk about your lovely wife, I'm sure she's lovely, that she wasn't ready early on for certain messages. Uh-huh. And when the student's ready, right, the teacher does appear. That is not just cliche. It's fully ready. It's fully accurate. And it was interesting. I end up in his home because I was like, I was in so much pain this time. That's how I found Jan Hurst. It's how I called Mark Groves. I end up in all these places. It was funny because I wasn't going to go to this retreat because I go into Mark's retreat, and Mark's like, "You're going."
Oh, interesting.
Like I'm going to Mark's, and he's like, "You're going to Connor's," because they're buddies. He's like, "You're going to go to Connor's retreat." Connor didn't need the money. They said there are 20 seats. They're filled.
Yeah.
Said you're going to go, right? But the subtitle is A Practical Guide to Face Your Darkness, End Self-Sabotage, and Find Freedom. I think that sounds like what we need, right? And this question of why am I the way I am? He says something that is so important in this book. And there's a chapter 6, is my favorite one. And this is heteronormative. And he even references like, look, we're assuming heteronormative, but you could invert this however. It's called Your Relationship to Women, the chapter. And we spend all heteronormative relationship, men, this is classic. There are entire sitcoms based on this. Everybody Loves Raymond, King of Queens, like, oh, my wife's so difficult, she won't put out. I mean, it's all of the humor, and everybody laughs. And Deborah was difficult, and Everybody Loves Raymond, and so on and so forth, right? Carrie was difficult to Doug Heffernan in King of Queens. It's those shows are actually a huge problem because what they do is they perpetuate this thing that the women are difficult and the men are stupid. So watch this: men are difficult, women are difficult, men are stupid. The woman won't put out, and he just wants to watch football. Like you on Thursday night.
Yeah.
Do you see this kind of common myth?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so what Connor talks about is he says, our life changes relationally when we realize that it's not about her at all for us men, heteronormatively. It's about what is revealed in me in relationship. Yeah. When we start to go, what is being revealed in me? What kind of shadow is being revealed in me? What hang-ups keep being revealed in me? By the way, this is not a hall pass for women to dominate their man and walk all over them. But can you see that shift? Yeah. We go from, because, and then guys go on guys trips and they go, oh, and they grate on their husband, and then women go on girls trips or on their wife, and women go on girls trips and they grate on their husband, and men are dumb. I'm not saying all women and men do. Sure. But we've been taught this.
The stereotype.
We're taught this, right? And so this book is an invitation to stop making it about something out there and start making it about something in here. And so every freaking time I'm triggered, I had a heartbreak this week. Last 10 days. Every single time I'm triggered, every single time there's a heartbreak, I'm really tempted to make it about them.
Yeah, right? It always starts with you.
Yeah. And then I'm like, and I start going, what would Mark say? What would Connor do? What would Jen tell me to do? My it's kind of been my coach therapist. So this has been really liberating for me, this work of like, it's not about the woman I went on a date with. It's not about my wife. It's It's about what is being revealed in me. And so here's the cool part. There's your book, brother.
Well, thank you. The other unique thing about that too is the only person that you can change is you. Right. And so like, if you say like, oh, my relationship failed because of her, well, we can't change her and or fix her. So how are you going to be better in your next relationship if you take no ownership of your role in the relationship failing?
Well, I talked about some friends who the husband had an affair.
Yeah.
He did. It was unfair. This is definitely a dick move. Definitely not helpful. But here's the problem. How long does the spouse want to ride that story out for the rest of their life?
Yeah.
Instead of going, well, now, and this isn't a license for people to abuse each other and then pull there's this kind of, there's this like, I would almost call it gaslighty thing anymore. Like, well, anything you feel is about you. It's not about me, right? I think we have to be cautious with that. We need to be kind. That are, by the way, our behaviors and actions do affect others.
Of course.
But, how do we take ownership? And here's the cool part about this work. It translates to business. Yesterday we had a little conversation at our office. We have agents in our office who mentor other agents. It's how we leverage. We had a little mentor meeting and said, how we doing? Are you guys meeting with them every Tuesday, et cetera? Well, I got really intense. And part of my personality can be, dude, I can be way too intense. I can get really condescending and way too fierce if I'm upset. And one of my agent partner, who's like a close friend to me, like a sibling, I checked in after and said, hey, are you okay? Kind of the countenance changed. Yeah, just your intensity was, and this person definitely has struggles with that, with dealing with intensity from someone. But what happened was they said, that's just, I don't do well with that. And I wanted to, well, that's about you.
Yeah.
I breathed. I left the room. They had to get on a coaching call with their personal business coach. Many of my agents have their own business coach besides me.
Yeah.
And I sent a text after and said, thank you for the feedback. I can be a dick. I can be too intense. I can be condescending. I can be an asshole. I didn't say all those words. I need the feedback. Thank you.
He probably really
it was
appreciated
uncomfortable,
that response,
dude.
too.
It was not, bro. I did not like how I felt.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't like the intensity of how I acted. I didn't like the feedback. I didn't like how that affects my people. Like, there's just parts about me I don't like, but that's okay because that's parts, right?
Well, and it's really just directing your intensity in positive ways because you also built what you built because of the intensity. Just got to shine that light in the right spot.
Sure. Well, it's like I come in here, I'm real passionate and intense, but we're having a podcast. This is fun.
Yeah.
Right? There's no stakes here.
No. Well, that's what it's so funny. So when I first started doing my speaking, right? Because I do talks as well. And in the beginning, I was like stressing over it so bad, like trying to memorize it, trying to like make it be what I thought it was supposed to be. And then I realized, like, what am I doing? Like, the audience has no idea what I'm going to say. And it's my philosophy and my belief. I literally can't be wrong. Even if I didn't mean to say something, it's like, it's only my message to share. So it's not like there's a book report and the audience all said, Cody needs to read this book and come share it with us. It's
Correct.
my message. So it's like, I don't need that anxiety of like, how am I going to do it? I just got to do it. So like when I spoke at the Utah Alliance, I didn't practice. I didn't prepare. I just went out and spoke because it is just my message. And I believe it's way more impactful when I'm just organically me versus trying to be like a perfected version of it.
You and guaranteed you delivered the best message.
100%.
Your book, and it's funny because I've read, like, I skimmed through it because I got it Tuesday.
Yeah.
I had this pressure that I should have read it before I came in here.
Egoically. Oh, interesting.
Isn't that
Yeah.
funny? I had this egoic pressure. I should have read it. But then when I skimmed it, I was loving it because in the opening chapter, you tell the story of you trying to start your little cottage business where you took your family stuff from the pantry and resold it.
Yeah.
Funny. So that pressure, but I was laughing because as I alluded to earlier, when I was like 8, we lived at 525 South, 600 East, right down by the old East Elementary, Atwood Innovation. We lived 3 doors down from Atwood. And I went to that elementary and I set up a shop in the hallway and I took a paper cup and taped it to the wall of the bathroom. I started charging my siblings to use the bathroom. Only I didn't make $20. I think you said it was $2.25. I think that's what I made.
Nice.
And they were like, hey, that was really cute for a day.
Yeah. The next day, they didn't want to pay anymore.
I don't even know where I got the idea that I should charge them to go to the bathroom, but I did, dude. Isn't that classic?
I got a great. So I love Jordans. You can see I got a pair of Jordans right here.
Those?
And then
match the book.
If you can see these ones,
Oh,
when
sick.
I got these,
Those look good.
my son was like, "Dad, I want those." My son's 7, right? So his feet grow at a fast accelerated rate. Yeah, and he goes, "I want those." I said, "Okay, I'm not going to buy them for you, but you certainly can raise money for the shoes." And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, that's how business works. If I don't have money for something, I have to go ask people. I have to raise money to get the thing that I want." I said, "So you know a lot of people. You've got family, you've got neighbors, like perhaps they'll support you in your efforts." He's like, "Well, how do I do that?" And I said, "Well, you tell him, I would really like to buy my first pair of Jordans. Would you be willing to help support me in that effort?" And so he's like, "I'll do it." So we like FaceTimed his grandma's. He went around the neighborhood. He went to all the neighbors' houses, and gave them this pitch about how he was trying to raise these. And I was like, "Don't ask for a lot of money. Ask for $5. Everyone can part ways with $5 for a cute kid, Literally, the shoes were $100. Within 20, 40 minutes, he raised the money, bought the shoes.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, that is so interesting because we tell ourselves we can't do the thing.
Yeah.
Right. It goes back to my salespeople that aren't when they're not converting. I'm like, guys, a lot of it is you don't believe you can convert.
Yeah. Right.
This kid got it in his mind that he could go raise the money. And what happened the second he got the first $5 bill? He had a little taste.
Well, that's what winning the moment's about. It's momentum.
Yes, dude. He's like, "Ooh, that tasted good."
Yeah.
And then he keeps going, and then he keeps going. I want to ask you a question. What do you feel like? 2 questions. How long did it take you to write the book?
That's a great question. I like to say it took a lifetime, but in reality, it took 2 years.
Yeah. Well, 48 years is what it took me to say everything I've just said.
Yeah.
2 years. Dude, I want to write a book, and I don't even know what it's about yet.
I didn't either at first.
Okay. Beauty. I just like the idea of it. Number 2, what do you feel like, and let's go back 24 months. What do you feel like is the number one thing you've learned about you in the last 2 years?
Oh man, what a fucking! I'm supposed to ask the questions.
Yeah.
Blake and Mallory cut it. Interview's over.
Blake and Mal, do not do it.
What a great question. What have I learned about myself the most in the last 24 months? That I'm capable of more than I give myself credit for.
Yeah. That was pretty succinct.
Yeah.
Right? Seriously. I'll tell you what I've learned about me. I love that answer. This coming home thing.
Yeah.
Coming home. Because now it's part of my language. It's part of my vocabulary. I've learned that all of the answers within reason are here. They're actually in me. I do fully believe in higher power and in God. And so, because I believe that me is connected to whatever source is. And guys, whatever you want for higher power. But I always tell people, but you should try one on, otherwise you're the God of your world. And that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But that was the thing that I learned is I can listen to podcasts and I get ideas. And I belong to a mastermind called Metrics. I belong to one called the CEOs of Real Estate. I belong to one called Radio Intelligence
Yeah, you're doing a lot of work.
But still, those are tactical. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, here's what we did. We did this direct mailer and here's how you send it out and here's what it said and we got 17 leads from it. It's tactical. The answers, though, are here, right? Like they're inside of me. And so I referenced, and we're probably about out of time, but I want to share something kind of cool. There's this theme of restoration that came to my attention in the last year. And a couple years back, all these things fizzle. The Larkin Group and Jeremy Larkin are this brand that looks good, but I'm over here in the sides going, what's going on? I'm losing my mind. So I bought this house. I moved when I was divorced. I moved to this house at 144 South, 200 West, downtown. All brick. It's not 1,500 feet. It's actually 1,477. 3 beds, 2 baths. And it was old. And I got it, and I didn't think anything of it. I just liked old downtown homes.
Yeah.
And how I bought the home is I was actually in the divorce proceeding. This sweet little old lady called me, Grace Codweiss. She moved to Colorado, and I think she passed away because she's 93 then.
Wow.
5 years ago. She called and said, I heard your Gary LeVox endorsement. I love Gary. He's so cute. She was 93. Gary LeVox is the lead singer of Rascal Flatts. We have an endorsement from this guy.
Okay.
We have it's interesting how we've built our brand. I said, great. She's like, yeah, I want to sell my house. I I mean, she didn't say it like that. She said it like a sweet old lady. And I said, what's your address? And she said, 144 South 200 West, 2 blocks from my door. At that time, my office door. I said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. I went over and I'm already thinking I'll buy it.
Yeah.
So I said to her, I have a deal for you. She said, what are we going to do? We have 3 cats and she's 93. So her adult daughter was in the home. She was 70. Her adult daughter was 70. Like, do the math, right?
Yeah.
And she said, we have 3 cats and the house it wasn't bad, but it was kind of like an old, couple little old lady's house, right? And on this darling lot with giant trees everywhere. And she said, how are we going to show it? I said, I have a deal for you. I'll buy it and we'll get an appraisal, third-party appraisal, whatever they appraise it for, I'll pay. You don't have to put it on the market. And it was a godsend to them. It was a godsend to me. Yeah. In 45 days, I moved in. Well, I didn't see what was happening. Well, time passed, and then we had a dog. My former partner, I said this relationship was my former fiance. It's really a beautiful human. And we had her dog, and her dog passed. That was rough. I mean, I cried for 2 days.
Yeah, I cried the hardest ever in my life when my lab passed away.
Oh, so
hardest I ever cried.
Yeah, so there's a lab story forthcoming. So we put this sweet Maple down, and it was like we put her down. It was rough. And along came an opportunity. The RSQ Animals here in town reached out to her and said, we have a dog that just came from Hilldale. He's 4 months old, and he was hit by our car or something, but they had to amputate his leg yesterday. Well,
they also abuse animals out there all the time.
Bingo. And we didn't know what the truth was.
Yeah.
So his back right leg was healed, broken, and he was only 4 months old. Fully. Oh, that's where they take all their animals from. And she said, hey, do you want to foster this? And I said, absolutely not. Whatever. But fine, we'll go see him. His name is Max. So we went and saw him. It was a Thursday. And his leg was one day amputated, and he was in his own little pen, and his whole hip was stapled closed. And of course, he's freaking adorable. Black lab mix, though he had a white tuxedo chest.
Okay.
And I'm like, damn it. I already know what's going to happen here. I said, fine. So 3 days later, Sunday, we came home, we got him. We didn't make it off Sunset to Bluff. And I'm like, I'm keeping the dog. So Max became my little best friend. Restoration. So I buy this 1966 home, and I kind of restore it. Restoration. I get Max. Restoration. Cameo Florist building goes up for sale. I look at it, and I say, wow, we could do something cool with that. I buy it from the Larson family.
And it's also lucky it didn't get demolished because they wanted it for that other big building, but they wouldn't sell.
They would not sell the 605.
Yeah, they just wouldn't do it. So it's amazing that it wasn't demolished.
It's crazy. And so I have this vision, and we buy the building, and it starts. And we gut it. Gut the building, put 16 new openings in the building, all this stuff. Restoration. This relationship ends in the middle of this restoration that I was in, and I come home to myself, right? And one of the things that I got involved in through that was working with Jen with some plant medicine. It's friggin' awesome. It's the most beautiful thing I'd ever done.
Yeah.
And therapeutically, in a controlled environment.
Yeah.
And this theme comes up, restoration. And I come home to myself. In that time period, I realize it's time to move to a bigger home, and I don't know why. And I purchased a 1960 home on Hope Street in St. George. Hope Street, right? Not lost on me.
Yeah.
So I have a 1966 and a 1971. Oh, wait. Before this happens, a home on Main Street goes up for sale. It's an 1869 historic home. I buy it. It was built by Samuel and Hannah Miles in 1869 while they lived in a covered wagon. Restoration. I then moved to the new house. Restoration. And what I realized, and I want to encourage, there's a reason I want to tell this story. I think that our lives have a theme, all of us.
Yeah.
And mine, for some reason, and I'm not a big restoration guy. I don't fix stuff, Cody. I don't fix anything. I pay people to fix things.
Yeah.
Okay, dude?
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
But suddenly I wake up and realize I have a 1966 home, a 1971 building, a 1960 home, and an 1869 home, and a dog with 3 legs. And it became really clear to me that my life has a theme. And the theme is that, which sounds kind of religiously philosophical, but it's probably more biblically philosophical, that broken things can be mended.
Yeah.
You know, that things that were damaged can become whole or recovered.
Yeah.
That's the theme. Dude,
I've
latched onto it, brother.
Could it also be that like you couldn't fix your marriage? You want to fix these homes?
Maybe. Yeah. Well, guess what? I couldn't fix it, but truthfully, I look at my ex-spouse. I look at myself. We are better than we've ever been.
Sure. It's like
Better than we've ever been.
Inherently, you did restore it.
Oh, well, she went back to school. She got a degree. She got a master's. She's a therapist. She wasn't doing any of that with me.
Yeah, right.
I was effectively in the way, and probably vice versa.
Sure.
So I encourage people from my life view. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I don't play one on TV, but I think our lives have a theme, and it's kind of fun to find that theme and say, I think I can ride this thing.
Yeah, I love that. What's your theme?
Yeah.
Okay, then I can't let you leave without answering this question.
You ask anything you want.
But how do you define success?
Oh, what? I like that question a lot. How I define success is actively seeking to do things in a great way.
I like that.
There's a quote, and I don't know who said it. I know exactly who said it. Rick Rubin. Now I remember.
Yep.
He said there's a difference between striving to your own greatness and to be great, and striving to be the best. And so success for me is, do I strive to do things well? Yeah. Just like do things well for the sake. We went through this whole thing, Cody, for years of, do we want to be the number one real estate team in Southern Utah? I mean, units, sales volume, income.
Mathematically and statistically speaking.
We're in the top 3. I don't care though. I did.
Yeah.
But when I got honest with me, I realized, no, but are we doing even the renovation that you were so kind about? People love the building. That's great. That was great work. Like we took this thing and made it special.
Yeah.
Do we sell the most homes? No. Kind of generic, but that's my definition, man.
I love it. Well, I just think it's so important to define it, right? Because I think that, and really I'm asking for that in a lot of ways, because when I go talk to college classrooms, they're always asking me that question. And it's such a flawed question because they haven't defined what I think success is. Mm-hmm. And so I can't give you, they're asking it in like the traditional societal definition of like money and wealth. But it's like, if that's not your initiative, it's irrelevant. So I think that all of the young people need to set out and determine what they want and then pursue that. And don't let society define for you what you're supposed to go after. Because I think that's the race we get stuck in.
It's the comparison game, man.
Yeah.
It's the competing game, and no one can compete with you with being you.
Absolutely. Okay, anything you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah. What did I do with my phone? I'm going to share something from your book.
Okay.
I know it.
Wonderful.
It was actually a quote you shared. No, not to say that you didn't say great things. I took a picture in the book last night.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm doing 75 hard right now.
Oh, you are? Okay, great.
It's hard.
Yeah.
I also added cold plunging and meditation to it. So I cold plunge every morning. I was already cold plunging, but it sucks. So anyway, 75 hard is hard. And the reason it's hard is it's inconvenient. And if anyone has not done it or listened to the podcast by Andrew Frisella, it's not a fitness program. I'm fit. I was fit before.
Yeah.
It's a will I keep my word?
Yeah.
Program.
Absolutely.
Okay. This is a Hormozy quote. You ready?
Yeah.
If you can wait 90 days for a result, you know which one it is, you can win. If you can wait a year, you can win big. If you can wait a decade, you can be the best. If you can wait a lifetime, you can change the world. Oh. Whoa.
Alex Hormozy's got some dimes.
Not even my words.
Yeah. What a great way to end it. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for being here. This was so fun. We just literally were like just everywhere. And
I hope it's fun for somebody.
I think it's more fun for listeners when you just don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And so I think that was great. And I appreciate you being here.
Imagine being married to me.
Yeah, you're a visionary, I'm sure. So all that perspective and all your vulnerability. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Okay. Boom. Appreciate it, brother.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Later.